Since 18th century before Christ, the death penalty is applied for different felonies in our society. Many people have been sentenced to death in the history. But what is the death penalty? The death penalty, or capital punishment, is a statutory penalty to execute a person who has been found guilty of misconduct described as a capital crime. The sentence is pronounced by the judicial institution at the end of the trial. In the absence of a trial, or in case where it is not carried out by a recognition institution, we speak of summary execution, act of revenge, or private justice. The death penalty violates a most fundamental right, the right to live. Today, you will learn more about this sanction that is much discussed and leads to several debates of opinion around the world.
The origin of death penalty. The first established death penalty laws date as far back as the 18th century before Christ in the Code of King Hammurabi of Babylon, which codified the death penalty for 25 different crimes. The death penalty was also part of the 14th century before Christ of the Hittite Code. In the 7th century before Christ, Draconian Code of Athens, which made death the only punishment for all crimes. And in the 5th century before Christ, Roman's Law of the 12 Tablets. Death sentences were carried out by such means as crucifixion, drowning, beating to death, burning alive, and impalement.
The death penalty today. Since this time, the world has evolved and a lot of change were made. At the end of 2017, 106 countries, the majority of states in the world, had abolished the death penalty in their legislation for all crimes. But unfortunately, even today, many of those sentenced to death are innocent. In example, according to a study made by the American Academy of Science, using a proven statistical method, 4.1% of those sentenced to death are victims of miscarriage of justice. Applying to this rate, 1,000 people executed since 1974, it could be inferred that more than 50 innocent people were executed. In addition, in many countries where people have been sentenced to death or executed, the death penalty has been imposed following a procedure that does not meet international standards of a fair trial. In some cases, confessions were extracted through torture or other ill treatment, including in Saudi Arabia, China, Iraq, and Iran. In Canada, the death penalty was abolished in 1976, and since this time, the homicide rate has continued to decline overall. The homicide rate has never exceeded the peak of 3.03 for 100,000 citizens reached in 1975, the year preceding the abolition of death penalty. In fact, the homicide rate was on the rise until the death penalty was abolished. The homicide rate has dropped by 52% since the abolition of the capital punishment. But a recent survey showed that 63% of Canadians are in favor of death penalty. In 2016, at least 23 states carried out execution, while a total of 55 countries handed down death sentence. Bonjour Alexandre.
Bonjour.
Ça va bien?
Oui, toi?
Ouais. Je vais te poser quelques questions en anglais sur la peine de mort.
C'est bon.
So are you for or against the death penalty?
Ben, moi, je suis pour. Ben, ça dépend pour quel crime. Ça dépend lesquels.
Okay. And do you have example of crimes?
Ouais. Des crimes comme la pédophilie ou le meurtre d'un enfant ou même l'agression sexuelle, pour moi, ça mériterait une peine de mort.
Okay. And what do you think of method of execution that are used today?
Pour moi, les méthodes de peine de mort, comme dans les pays occidentaux, comme les États-Unis, d'après moi, c'est quand même bien géré, donc c'est quand même correct. Ou les continents comme l'Asie ou l'Afrique, d'après moi, c'est pas mal exagéré à mon point de vue.
Okay. And do you think that the death penalty have a deterrent effect on criminal?
Non, parce que d'après moi, s'ils encouragent à faire un meurtre, d'après moi, il n'y a rien qui va pouvoir les arrêter de vouloir faire ce qu'ils veulent. Donc, malheureusement, je crois pas.
Okay. And do you think that the death penalty have its place on today's society?
Ouais, ça oui, par exemple, parce que il y a encore beaucoup de hauts criminels qui méritent amplement la peine de mort.
C'est bon. C'est tout. Merci.
The principal countries that apply death penalty. The country that most apply death penalty is China. China does not publish any official figure on the number of executions that take place on its territory. However, Amnesty International estimated to be several thousand per year. The Dui Yua Foundation advanced the figure of 4,000 people. Executions are often carried out by firearm. The country has also been practicing lethal injection since 1997. The second is Iran. In Iran, execution can be stoning, hanging, strangling, and sometimes shooting, killing 507 people in 2017. The most condemned crimes are adultery and blasphemy towards important figures of Islam. The third is Saudi Arabia with 146 executions in 2017. The kingdom practiced decapitation and stoning. The fourth is Iraq with 125 executions in 2017. Most of those sentenced to death and those executed were members of armed groups responsible for murder, kidnapping, rape, and other violent crimes, Amnesty International said. The association said, however, that the official figures are far from reliable and consider that they are reduced by the government. Does the death penalty really have a deterrent effect? No serious study has so far proven beyond doubt that the death penalty was a deterrent. On the contrary, the majority of research on the subject shows that death, as punishment, has never prevented a person motivated to commit a criminal offense from perpetrating it. Moreover, it often happens that a justifiable act is committed without premeditation or on the spur on the moment and even accidentally. In this type of situation, it seems once again unlikely that the person concerned has stopped to think of the consequences that may result from his or her act. Salut Amé.
Salut.
Je vais poser quelques questions sur la peine de mort si ça te dérange pas en anglais.
Parfait.
Donc, do you agree with the death penalty? Ça veut dire, est-ce que tu es en accord avec la peine de mort?
Non, je suis vraiment pas d'accord avec la peine de mort.
Is your answer the same if we are talking about terrorists who cause hundreds of deaths? C'est-à-dire, est-ce que tu es d'accord même si on parle de terroristes qui causent des centaines de morts?
J'ai la même réponse parce que je crois que ça vient brimer le droit fondamental à la vie.
Ok. Donc, do you believe in the rehabilitation of convicts after a long sentence?
Je crois à la réhabilitation parce que on change tous, puis dans des peines, dans des longues peines, ben 50 ans c'est long. On peut vraiment changer pendant ces années-là.
Ok. So for you, the death penalty is exaggerated for all crimes committed on earth. Donc, selon toi, tous les crimes commis, ça mérite pas la peine de mort. Tous les crimes commis sur terre.
Oui, effectivement. Il n'y a pas de crime qui mérite la peine de mort. Parce qu'on peut se tromper aussi dans les jugements.
Ouais.
Donc, des fois, il y a des meurtres qui pourraient être évités.
Ouais. Donc, merci. Donc, bonne journée.
Merci.
In conclusion, I hope that this documentary will have taught you new things about the death penalty.